Touchdown with Aaron Masemola. On the bench with local legends. Your questions, your heroes.
Welcome to the Touchdown with Aaron Masemola. And yes, it has been a phenomenal week in terms of the rugby. Round number 6 of the Super Rugby Unlocked competition. And of course, there is so much for us to talk about, and it is Reaction Monday, an opportunity for you to join the sporting discussion and let us know what you thought of some of the action that we saw this past weekend. But to touch on some of the results that we saw this past weekend, we saw the Sharks taking down the Griquas by the courtesy of Cohen Bosch, a man that had the magic touch there, taking the Sharks over the line there by 34 points. And the Griquas putting just 33 points on the board in a very, very close encounter over there. And then, unfortunately, the second game of the weekend was unfortunately cancelled or postponed, that being the Lions against the Pumas due to positive COVID-19 cases in the Pumas camp. And then the last game of the weekend was at the Newland Stadium, a stadium that might slowly but surely move slightly out of South African rugby history, because the Western Province will now be moving to the Cape Town Stadium, and we saw the Toyota Cheetahs taking on the Stormers. Dominant performance from the Stormers in the second half there. The Cheetahs falling short, putting 13 points on the board, and the Stormers putting 30 points on the board in that particular encounter. But joining me to discuss all of the events from this past weekend, and most importantly, that Cheetahs game, and to give us his analysis and his knowledge on the game, is Jóhann Thormählen. Now, he's a sports journalist, specifically also a rugby commentator, and he will be sharing his knowledge with me this morning. Jóhann, how are you doing this morning?
Morning, Aaron. Good to talk to you again, but unfortunately, like you said, the Cheetahs weren't on the winning end.
Unfortunately, it has been a very difficult weekend this past weekend, with the Cheetahs unfortunately falling short. And I think there's a very important point that we need to talk about, and that's particularly the situation with the Lions and the Pumas game being postponed, because it's not the first time that we are seeing a game being postponed. We saw the game between the Lions and the Cheetahs also being postponed earlier in the competition as well. Can you just give us an update with regards to this particular situation and the decisions that has been made by SA Rugby?
Yeah, I think since Friday, there's been a lot of talking around this issue, because if you remember back, the game between the Cheetahs and the Lions were the first one in South African rugby that was affected. So first they said they are postponing the match, and they might reschedule, try and get another date to play it. And then eventually they couldn't get another date because the programs are so full, get Super Rugby Unlocked and then the Currie Cup, and they play every single weekend. So they either have to do it in the week somewhere, which is hard because then the teams can't train like they usually do, and COVID-19 tests and all of those things are also involved. Remember, all the teams, all the players get tested each week before game day. So, and then eventually the Cheetahs and the Lions had to share the points, 2 log points each. And yeah, on Friday, it was interesting that SA Rugby released a media press release that said they are really committed or trying to reschedule the match between the Lions and the Pumas, which I thought is quite interesting, because I didn't see a big commitment from their side playing the Cheetahs and the Lions game over or rescheduling that one. Even Harvey Fourie, the Cheetah coach, came out and said he thought that, they didn't really try to reschedule it. There was no word from SA Rugby for their match. And now, because it has a bigger bearing on the results of the tournament, they're trying to maybe reschedule. Because, let me take you further, it's not only the Lions and the Pumas match of past Saturday, it's also the one coming up between the Bulls and the Pumas. Because if the Puma players are in quarantine for 10 days now, then they will also not be able to play against the Bulls. And if the Bulls win that match, they win Super Rugby Unlocked. They just need a win because they already have 19 log points. So, for instance, now, if the Bulls game get cancelled as well, then the Bulls will also just get 2 log points. Then maybe the Stormers or the Sharks can pass the Bulls. So it's got a big bearing on the results of the tournament. And even if you reschedule the matches, technically Super Rugby Unlocked finishes this coming weekend, because then we start with the Currie Cup, although the log points will be taken over into the Currie Cup. So I think from a South African rugby perspective, and not just a Cheetah perspective, you just want consistency, and you want them to treat each team and each game that's cancelled the same way. Because I think especially the Cheetahs will feel aggrieved if if the other matches get played and their one didn't. Something interesting just from around the world, we even see in Europe, in the French top 14, I think there's been about 8 or 9 matches that has been cancelled, and we even saw it was the final of the English Premiership between London Wasps and Exeter Chiefs, where London Wasps had 11 positive COVID-19 tests before the final, and then the rules of the tournament, or the COVID rules for that, was that if you have 12 positive tests, you can't take part in the match, and then it's a default for the next team to play. So they actually missed it by 1 positive test, and they could play in the final. So it's a whole new thing for sport in general and rugby. I mean, you need set rules from my side, or that's what I think. Set rules. If this happened, this is the result. If this happens, this is the result. And then you need leadership from, say, SA Rugby or somebody else that's in charge to tell people, okay, if the game can't be played, then this happens. And there's another match that I think of now, a Free State under 21 match against the Lions under 21, where the Cheetahs had about 6 or 7 positive cases, and even their coach, Isak van der Westhuizen, tested positive, and they still played the match on the Sunday. So now you think, okay, how come some matches get cancelled and others don't? So that's just something I think, especially the fans, will also ask questions about.
Definitely, and I think there is still a lot of confusion about this, but it's also a good thing to hear that it's not necessarily the first time that it's happening. It's also happened abroad as well, and hopefully South African rugby will be able to clarify this issue, because as you do mention, moving towards this weekend and in terms of the trophy being lifted for the Super Rugby Unlocked series, it will be a very important situation as to who actually lifts the trophy at the end of the day. But touching on the games that we saw this past weekend, I would love for us to focus particularly on the game that we saw between the Stormers as well as the Toyota Cheetahs. We have to admit that what you just mentioned in terms of the game being cancelled between the Lions and the Toyota Cheetahs almost led to the Cheetahs losing some momentum. We saw them now lose against the Sharks and now losing against the Stormers. What particularly went wrong for the Toyota Cheetahs? Because they've now lost 2-2, and the fans, myself and so many people across Central South Africa are becoming a little bit concerned with regard to the performance of the Cheetahs. Can you maybe just give us an analysis and a bigger picture as to what's happening with the Cheetahs?
Yeah, I think that the match that was cancelled against the Lions had a big bearing on their momentum. The Cheetahs, they are a side that need that momentum. If they start winning, then they kind of believe in themselves. They've got self-confidence, and they become more unstoppable each game they play. I mean, they were a bit lucky against the Bulls, and then they would have liked to play against the Lions. Not saying they would have won the game, but the Lions at that stage, they weren't on their best, and the Cheetahs were kind of the best team in the comp. And I think that match had a big influence on their momentum and maybe their morale, because it was the first match that was cancelled. And then against the Sharks, they were also a bit unlucky. We talked about that match, or I talked to other people, and it wasn't a great match to watch. It was actually the Sharks just made less errors than the Cheetahs. So, and then this weekend, I think that the Cheetahs, they're just struggling to convert and to use their opportunities, which they did in the first two matches actually. So I don't think it's big problems, but I think they need a win somewhere, and they need to score the tries that they aren't scoring at the moment.
Definitely. I think you talk about them taking their chances, and I would like for us to now maybe just focus on the performances of individual players as well as the performance of the team as a whole as well. I mean, when you look at a man like Roscoe Speckman, a touch of Speck magic that we saw on Saturday as well. Frans Steyn coming back into the squad, not having played against the Sharks, now making his appearance again against the Stormers. We saw brilliant performances from a man like Damian Willemse for the Stormers. And I mean, when you see those performances, it's almost that X factor that just takes the team over the line. Can you maybe just give us an analysis of some of the players individually in the Cheetah squad and their performances, and possibly where they can sharpen up going into the next round of this competition?
Yeah, so firstly, I'd like to start with, if you look at individual performances, then I would like to quickly stop at the Stormers. You mentioned Damian Willemse. I mean, he's been under a lot of criticism the past few weeks. Should he play 15? Should he play 10? And suddenly now he showed us what he can do. And I mean, like I said, in rugby, a week is a long time, from 0 to 0 in a week. And even Warwick Gelant, I mean, he's in phenomenal form for the Stormers, and sometimes you need those individuals to shine. And the Cheetahs, they got that from Roscoe Speckman, like you mentioned, and I mean that was probably just not only the try of the season, that might be one of the best tries we've seen in a few years. I mean, that's just Roscoe Speckman at his best. I mean, nobody would have thought of jumping in the air, going out of play, and still dotting the ball down. There's the 7 skills obviously came in there, because it was a great tackle from Jóhann Masemola to try and take him out, and most guys would have gone out. But I think with performances, especially against the Stormers, I really think that John-Ray Rudolph is a good acquisition, and a good replacement probably for Jasper Wiese that's gone to England. He was a big loss, but John-Ray Rudolph has proved himself. I mean, he's played well for the Bulls, for the Pumas, and I really think that he was a good signing from the Cheetahs. I think they struggled specifically in the scrums and the lineouts, and they didn't get enough quality ball there. Important lineout throw-ins, that was a problem for me. Especially, even if we talk about Roscoe, even from his try, the Cheetahs had a lineout on the Stormers' line. They threw the ball over, the Stormers kicked it, and Roscoe did magic, but still, they should have won that lineout, maybe a driving ball and score a try, which they didn't. So in that department, I think somebody like maybe Jock Tutue can come into play. He's a solid hooker with the lineouts. And even somebody like Oupa Mahoje, who's been out and had a run off the bench against the Sharks, he's also a very key lineout player, and that's one of the aspects where he's a real stalwart. So they can maybe bring in him at flank to help with the lineouts. So I think the lineouts was a problem, and especially the scrums. The Stormers put them under a lot of pressure in the scrums. And then obviously, France wasn't at his best, but that was probably because he didn't train, and they were still trying to get him fit for the game. And it's not like they can't play him because he's a World Cup winner. But he'll obviously be better next week again.
You touch on a few performances from the individual players as a whole in terms of the game that we saw against the Sharks this past weekend. But I think a lot of fans are now looking into the future of rugby in South Africa, looking at the 2020-2021 season. Is there a possibility that the Cheetahs can find some winning momentum and actually be able to look forward to defending the Currie Cup? And what can they do to just get that winning momentum again?
Well, firstly, I think they have the ideal opportunity on the weekend because they're playing against Griquas, and nothing against Griquas. I was really rooting for them on Friday night, and as a guy from Central South Africa, I was really bummed when Kerwin Bosch kicked that kick over. I really thought when Tinus de Beer slotted his penalty, I thought, yes, the Griquas are going to pull this one through. So they're not, even though they haven't won a match, they're still a really good side, and if they play like they played on Saturday, Friday rather, they might beat the Cheetahs. But the Cheetahs have the perfect opportunity because they're playing Griquas. So they need a win, they need to get the confidence up, they need to score a few tries, and they're playing at home. So if they can, that'll really help, their morale, getting back to the winning ways, and then building from there again. So I think that's the first thing. But the important things like discipline come into play. Obviously, the coach also said that their discipline let them down against the Stormers, too many penalties, and then just basic errors, like I mentioned before. The scrums, the lineouts, they need to be solid and less penalties. And then I'm sure if they have enough possession and things like that, then they will score tries because they are very dangerous. We talked about that back three a few weeks ago, Malcolm Yar, Clayton Blommetjies, and Roscoe Speckman. If you give those guys enough ball, and with Frans Steyn and Tiaan Schoeman, they're very dangerous.
Definitely. And I think many South Africans are hoping that we actually get back to the form that we saw against the Blue Bulls, where the Cheetahs can actually dominate the game, make the right decisions, and be able to take any particular game across the line. But Jóhann Thormählen, I would love to thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate your knowledge and your analysis as well. And we look forward to seeing you again on the touchdown. And most importantly, hopefully the Cheetahs get back to winning ways against the Griquas.
We certainly hope so. A lot of people in Central South Africa will be torn between the sides, but it's always a great derby to look forward to.
Touchdown with Aaron Masemola. On the bench with local legends. OFM Sport. The personalities behind the plays.